where in the world did feudalism exist? For the past few weeks, we've been focusing on the Middle Ages in Europe and the system of feudalism that has developed there. Now we're going to take some time to look at the feudal system that is very similar to that of Europe that developed in Japan. As we're going through our notes, make sure you guys are filling in and jotting down the information. So first, let's look at the geography of Japan. Japan is an island off the coast of China, as we can see here in the map in green, very close to both China and Korea. It's over 6,000 miles away, though, from Europe. One ancient legend says Japan was created by a god who reached down from the sky and dipped a spear into the ocean. As he drew the spear back up, drops of water fell from the sky and became the islands of Japan. Japan is a series of islands in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Asia. There are 4 large islands and over 3,900 smaller ones. Natural disasters are common on the islands. Typhoons begin over the ocean and then hit the land. There are many active volcanoes on the islands. Earthquakes occur frequently. There is not a lot of land for growing crops in Japan. Mountains cover 3/4 of the land and lush forests grow on their slopes. But the land between the mountains is fertile plain. Rain falls frequently. It's good for growing crops that need a lot of water, such as rice. Japan began to develop a unified civilization around 500 CE when warriors, known as samurai, lived in castles. Now would be a good point to pause this video and to summarize the geography of Japan on your notes. So feudalism, again focusing in Japan. How did it all begin? As we go through these notes, you'll notice some words that are in bold. Those are going to be the words you need to define, and the highlighting is the definition you're going to want to write in your notes sheet. So feudal Japan, from 1185 CE to 868 CE. From the beginning of Japanese civilization until 1185, an emperor ruled all of Japan. An emperor is similar to a king, but in Japan, he was also a religious leader. Again, go ahead and put that meaning, in the box for emperor. However, the emperor began to lose power in a series of wars. A civil war broke out in 1336 that ended the real power of the emperor. The emperor sent armies of what became known as samurai to fight the civil war for him. And when they returned, he gave the title shogun to the leader of the army, so that they would not take over as emperor. This began a new form of control in Japan, where the leaders of different armies controlled smaller pieces of land, rather than one emperor controlling everything. This is called feudal control. Feudalism. Feudal control began when wealthy landholders divided up the land into smaller areas and relied on peasants and serfs to farm the land and be soldiers, similar to medieval Europe. Feudalism, there we go, another term, is a type of government where a weak monarchy or an emperor tries to control an area of land through agreements with wealthy landholders. Feudalism brought many changes in Japan. The feudal period of Japanese history was a time when powerful families, daimyos, and the military power of warlords, shoguns, and their warriors, the samurai, ruled Japan. The Yamato family remained as emperor, but their power was seriously reduced because of the daimyo. Shoguns and samurai were so powerful. During this time period, the emperor appeared at ceremonies, celebrations, and parades, but had no real control over the people. This is the time period when Japan becomes very different than China. Japan often tried to model themselves after China, but during feudal times, Japan created their own unique identity. During the next 700 years of feudal Japan, different shoguns controlled Japan. Several civil wars were fought among the powerful armies or families and their samurai armies. The Mongols attempted to invade and conquer Japan in the early part of this time period. The Mongols would have easily invaded and conquered a much weaker Japan. However, a famous typhoon hit Japan and destroyed the Mongol boats and saved Japan. In 1543, a Portuguese trade ship landed in Japan for the first time. Japan had never seen European people. The trade ship carried many new products the Japanese had never seen, especially guns. The guns introduced by Portuguese would bring major changes to society. In the Battle of Nashido, 2,000 guns were used to shoot a charging army of samurai who still carried swords. The power of the samurai was seriously threatened. During the following years, traders from Portugal, the Netherlands, England, and Spain arrived, and so did many Catholic missionaries who tried to spread their religion to Japan. Many traditional Japanese leaders disliked the changes brought by Europeans, but the emperor saw this as an opportunity to regain power. So let's take some time to look at feudalism in Japan. We can see an image of a knight on a horse in its suit of armor to the left, and some Japanese samurai in their suit of armor to the right. Remember, both of their jobs were to defend their lords. So, Japan in the 1800s. The imperial system, or rule by emperor, gradually weakened as noble families gained more power. The emperor lost most of his power as his rule became primarily religious and ceremonial. In the late 1100s, the imperial system gave way to feudalism. Under feudalism, political power rested in the hands of military warlords. Emperor remained the highest rank in feudal society, but their position was mainly as a figurehead, or someone who holds office but has little to no political power. The most powerful person in Japanese society was the shogun, or the supreme military leader. Below the shogun were the daimyo, or the landlords. The daimyo were given control of pieces of land on which they built castles and towns and were allowed to raise armies. The warriors of feudal Japan were the samurai. The samurai were highly trained professional soldiers. They were hired by daimyo, who gave them plots of land and other rewards for their loyal service. The samurai are also respected as an upper class. In return, samurai warriors pledged loyalty and protection to their nobles. Samurai were expected to follow a strict code of behavior called Bushido that emphasized the core values of loyalty, bravery, and honor. They were expected to show a complete lack of fear of death. Before attacking, a samurai would first shout his name. Then he would shout out the bravery of his ancestors. This was meant to scare his enemy. Additionally, with no religious rules against suicide in Japanese culture, samurai captured in battle or who would otherwise broke the rules of Bushido killed themselves by the ritual of plunging their swords into and across their abdomens. The Bushido Code did not ask samurai to give any kind of special treatment to women. Japanese women were expected to be as tough and loyal as men. However, as time went on under the feudal system of Japan, women's status declined. The nobles and the samurai made up the upper class of Japanese feudal society. However, most of the people in Japan were peasants. They raised food for the nobles and warriors, just as the peasants did for the nobles and the knights in Europe. Japanese society also included craft workers and a few traders. Traders were looked down upon. Buying and selling goods was not considered honorable. Over time, feudal clans or families later united into larger groups. Eventually, Japan became a nation-state under one emperor. Japanese people honored their emperor. However, the emperor had no real power. The country was actually ruled by a warlord who was a military leader. One of these warlords was a man called Yorkimoto. And in 1192, he began to use the title of shogun. Shoguns were so powerful that they actually took over leadership from the emperors. For almost 700 years, one powerful shogun after another ruled Japan. Highly trained samurai enforced the shogun's rule, and the shogun's rule lasted until 1867.
Japan, from around the 1200s to the 1600s, was a feudal society. The emperor presided over a splendid court at Heian, but the real power lay in the hands of a supreme military commander called a shogun. To expand his control, the shogun gave large parcels of land to lesser warlords called daimyo, in return for their agreement to support the shogun with their armies in times of need. The armies were composed of great warriors called samurai. In return for their unswerving loyalty, the daimyo rewarded the samurai with gifts of land. With the aid of the samurai, the daimyo were able to control Japan for more than 400 years. Samurai were known for their great skill with the sword. Their swords sliced swiftly and precisely, making the samurai a deadly opponent. Their extraordinary military prowess was based on extraordinary achievements in technology. The samurai sword had to be hard enough to hold a sharp edge and flexible enough to absorb blows without breaking. Japanese sword makers were among the first to solve this problem, creating a blade that was both sharp and resilient, and they did it more than 800 years ago. The samurai were known not only for the advanced technology of their swords, but also for their ability to use them. Samurai studied martial arts here at the Karshima Grand Shrine. Like a chess player, a samurai always thought several moves ahead. A samurai learned hundreds of combinations of moves and trained relentlessly until his strokes became second nature and his mind, body, and sword moved as one. Hard, flexible swords weren't the samurai's only technological innovation. While Europeans made armor from metal, samurai used a flexible material woven from leather, iron, bamboo, and silk.
この鎧は非常に豪華にできてまして、戦いで用いるというよりも何か合戦場における装束というような趣があるものが日本の甲冑だと思います。
These small plates made of tough rawhide were the building blocks of the armor. The armor maker cut holes for stitching and smoothed each plate before joining them together in a flexible panel. These overlapping panels helped cushion a sword's blow, and because they were flexible, they bent with the blade's impact, which made it difficult for the opponent to do any damage.
Japanese feudal system, and we're fairly familiar with the European feudal system, let's turn to our interactive notebooks and let's create two pyramids to represent one of the feudal pyramid in Europe and the other in Japan. So draw this chart. You're welcome to summarize what these different roles are, but make sure that we include the different roles in society and what they do. If you need to pause to continue and then continue, go ahead. Do the same for the Japanese feudal pyramid as well.